Hey everyone. Passkeys have been a really big topic in the industry lately, but did you know that Passkeys and Microsoft Entra are now officially in public preview? Well, that's what Jan Bakker and I are talking about in today's episode of the Security Swarm podcast. We're going to talk about, again, give you a little quick definition of what Passkeys are, reference our previous episode on the subject. We'll also talk about prerequisites, some tips and tricks for implementation, and lots more on today's episode of the Security Swarm podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Security Swarm podcast, the podcast that brings you the knowledge and insights straight from the security lab here at Hornet Security. As always, I'm your host, Andy Serwich, and I've got Jan Bakker back on the show. How's it going, Jan?
Hi, thanks for having me again. It's going great. How are you?
Good. Doing good here, and happy to have you back on the show. I mean, the last time we talked was related to this topic. Today we're talking about passkeys specifically in the Microsoft ecosystem. But last time we kind of did an episode more generally on just what passkeys are, right?
Correct.
And so, for the purposes of this episode, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm so excited to talk about passkeys here, Jan, but I want to make sure we get a chance to introduce you. That way, if any of our listeners don't know who you are, why don't you go ahead and give us a quick introduction?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Jan Bakker. I'm based in the Netherlands, and I do a lot with Entra, specifically with Entra ID. So I do stuff with conditional access, security, compliance, also a bit of Intune sometimes, but I'm mostly focused on identity and access management. And of course, now it's all about passkeys. It's almost a buzzword, but yeah, that's what I do in my daytime job.
Very cool. You're a Microsoft MVP as well, if I remember correctly.
Correct. Yes, I'm very proud to be that.
Yes, it's a great program to be in. So very, very happy to have you on the show. And I'm glad you kind of mentioned like passkeys does kind of feel like a buzzword right now, right? But I feel like unlike some of the other buzzwords in the industry, like passkeys kind of actually lives up to the buzzwordedness of passkeys, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense because it's easier to explain passkeys than, for example, the buzzword zero trust that we hear for years. So it's more specific to one item that we can explain very easily to our end users, and it's also it's very user-centric. So passkeys are there for the users, while zero trusts are more for the admins and the people who care about security. So that makes it more easy.
Definitely. Well, as mentioned, we did cover kind of the core question of what are passkeys on a previous episode. I'll be sure to link that in the show notes, folks, in case you want to take a look at that. But for those people that may not know what they are, in about 30 seconds, I guess I would say passkeys are a new authentication mechanism using the FIDO2 standard, utilizing public key cryptography. So again, in an abridged form here, when you sign up with a service that supports passkeys, the service that you're signing up with has the public key, and then the private key only ever exists on your device. And the beauty of this model is even if the service end is compromised by threat actors, there's no secrets to steal, period, right? So not even hashed secrets. So that's the beauty of it. And I mean, going for super short definition here, but is there anything you would add to that, Jan?
Well, that's the technical side of things. From the user experience side of things, it will eventually replace your password. So passkeys will replace passwords, and also our MFA. So that's the beauty of it. So it's really strong. It's really user focused to make it easy and fast to authenticate yourself against any platform, basically.
Right, definitely. And, I'm glad you mentioned that part of it, the MFA part of it, because I've seen this question come up in a couple of different places. Like, okay, if I switch to passkeys, I'm, as far as the user is concerned, I don't have to type in another code. So have I lost my second factor? And well, no, you still have to unlock the passkey, whether that's through biometrics or OTP, depending on where you're storing the passkey, right? So, I mean, there is still the second factor, but it feels like people, because they're not having to type in their password, go over to their phone or, wherever their OTP code is from and type it in manually, they feel like they're losing that second factor, right? Which is not the case. And I think that's an important distinction for us to make.
Of course, and that's, I think, the goal of the FIDO Alliance, to make it as simple as it can be for the user. While I get the point that users say, hey, isn't passkeys not just one factor because I only have a passkey, but under the hood, there's so much involved. I mean, user presence needs to be done. That used to be touching your YubiKey, right? That's the user presence. Now we have Bluetooth connection underwater. So there is a lot of moving parts in the FIDO protocols that makes it really secure and unphishable. So it's really more secure than traditional MFA, I would say. But for the user, it feels like it's almost too easy now. And that's the goal. That's where we want to be.
Exactly. And so, I mean, to kind of build on that, that we've kind of been talking benefits here the last minute or two, but to kind of build on that, I want to go and reference a blog post that Alex Weinert put out on the Entra blog. And about, I don't know, 3 paragraphs down, he explains the benefits perfectly, absolutely perfectly. Passkeys are URL specific, right? And I'm quoting the article here. The provisioning process for passkeys records the relaying partner's URL, so the passkey will only work for sites with the same URL. Now, in the last episode that I had you on for, Jan, we talked about Evilgenics, and you have a ton of fantastic Evilgenics content out there. Evilgenics, of course, is a adversary in the middle attack type tool, right? And there's a whole bunch of other ones out there too. Reverse proxy style attacks. There's the Well Phishing Kit. There's Evil Proxy. There's PyPhisher, which is more of like a phishing as a service type of thing. So to me, this URL specific component just solves that whole problem because, the passkey knows that this is the URL that I am associated with. And if it's not the correct URL, it's just not going to work, right? So
exactly.
Fantastic.
Yep.
They are also, and going back to the article, they are also device specific. The relaying party will only grant access to the user if the passkey is synced, stored, or connected to the device from which they are requesting access. So we're talking about device-bound passkeys, which we're going to dive into here in a little bit more in a second. And then user-specific, right? The user must prove they're physically present during the authentication, usually by performing a gesture on the device from which they are requesting access. So coming back to that whole, yes, there is MFA. The user is MFA to unlock the passkey, right? So I'll link that blog post in the show notes because I think they do a really good job of kind of highlighting the benefits.
It does.
And we're also, while I'm thinking of it, we're going to be referencing a blog post that you put together, Jan, a fantastic post on passkeys in the Microsoft ecosystem. I'll put that in the show notes as well, folks, so you can check that out. But coming back to our outline here, because I know I tend to deviate a little bit, but before we kind of dive into the specifics of the preparation and prerequisites and how to enable passkeys in Entra and that type of thing, I think one conversation I've seen come up a lot recently is this whole conversation around device-bound versus syncable passkeys. Now, device-bound is exactly how it sounds, right? The passkey is bound to a physical device, whether it's a phone or a YubiKey or whatever, right? But then syncable certainly adds a layer of convenience to the process, right? Because that passkey can move between devices, but that also introduces an opportunity for a threat actor to make use of that syncability process potentially, right? Can you speak a little bit more, to the device-bound versus syncable question, Jan?
Yeah, sure. But it's related to the question I got around Windows Local Business, and users ask me, hey, why is a PIN more secure than a password? Because a PIN is mostly 4 characters, right? And then I said, of course. And it's the same like with all FIDO stuff. It's the device-bound part which makes it secure. So I could say my PIN code to you right now, but you can can't use it because you also need my device.
Right.
So device-bound passkeys are way more secure because you need the device itself to use the passkey. Now at the other end, having a credential stored on your device is good as long as your device works. But if you go buy a new shiny device, you swap your device for a new one, you have basically to copy all the tokens to your new device. But that's not possible because device bound is device bound. It cannot be synced to any other device. So you have to re-enroll all the tokens again, all the passkeys. So that's why they also came up with syncable passkeys, which is way more convenient for the end user because you can store passkeys pretty much everywhere. You can store them in your traditional password manager, for example. You can store them in your iCloud keychain or similar to Android somewhere in the cloud. But like you said, that's also a threat because now the passkeys become the new passwords for attackers because you can go after those vaults which are basically stored in the cloud. And it will, I will not say as soon as you have the passkey that you can use them to sign in, but it will make it more easy. So having your passkey stored somewhere in the cloud, make it syncable around all your devices, could potentially be a threat in the future. But to be honest, we'll just have to see how that will end up. So I don't have a globe where I can see how the future would look like. But if you will go full security, just stick with the device-bound passkeys, right? But for convenience, we eventually will see a lot of syncable passkeys in the future, especially around commercial services. Maybe not in the enterprise, but for example, for your social media accounts, it will be more standard.
Right. And I've seen the argument made, and I do tend to agree with it myself. I'd love to get your take on this, is that when we compare syncable passkeys with a traditional password with MFA, you're still more secure with the syncable passkey just by nature of it being passkeys versus a password, right? I would agree with that statement. How about you?
Yeah, of course, because it's very simple. A password plus MFA is still phishable, while a passkey is not phishable. So again, if we talk about man or advisory in the middle, you cannot sit in the middle of that authentication session and just snoop away that token because it's phishable, it's phishing resistant, because it will never talk to the URL other than it was registered with. So it won't talk to any fake URLs of any other domain. So yes, it's still way more secure than traditional username plus password or MFA.
And I'm putting my threat actor hat on here, just going down the rabbit hole. And this is probably a conversation for a whole different episode, but now I'm thinking like, okay, well, if I can't, use a custom URL, I wonder if we'll see a uptick in the amount of DNS poisoning attacks just to try and get around that whole URL requirement. You know what I mean? So
yeah, it's a cat and mouse game. So eventually,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
It's always a cat and mouse game, of course, between attackers and defenders. So eventually, there will be new threats against specifically passkeys. So we'll see how that turns out. But yeah, it's only my best guess.
Right. And again, just thinking out loud here, I took it a step further. I'm like, okay, yeah, if I do end up with a DNS poisoning attack, if I'm the attacker, I still don't have the private key that's associated with the passkey. So even that wouldn't work, So passkeys are very well thought out here. That's for sure.
And I think if someone finds a way to crack it, make it non-phishing resistant, or is able to phish them, I think we have a lot of more problems to solve because it's based on good old cryptographic key pairs, right? So that we have more problems to solve.
No joke. So, well, Jan, I want to make sure we get into the preparation and prerequisites part of the conversation. And like I mentioned earlier, you have a fantastic blog post out there on your blog that kind of covers some of what we've already talked about, but more specifically, how to prepare for passkeys, what some of the major prerequisites are, etc. Can you kind of go through some of that for us?
Yeah, sure. Well, Microsoft previously launched the public preview for Passkeys, and the way they do it is they use Microsoft Authenticator app to basically be a passkey/password provider on your mobile phone, which is either iOS or Android. Those two are supported by now. So think about your Authenticator app, which you use for traditional MFA, either UTP codes or push notifications, will now be a device-bound passkey. So you will register a passkey within your Authenticator app. Now, before you can do that, it's really important to know how that works within Microsoft 365. And I will refer to Microsoft 365 as Entra ID, because that's where mainly you do the configuration part. So it is all based on FIDO standards, right? And that's why Microsoft also incorporated the new passkeys into the FIDO2 authentication method section within your tenant. And eventually it will just be renamed to passkeys altogether, because a FIDO key, like a YubiKey, is also a passkey, a device-bound passkey. So that's where the magic happens in your tenant. So Microsoft released two AA GUIDs, and basically the AA GUID is the unique identifier for a passkey provider, which is Authenticator app for iOS or Authenticator app for Android. And you need to specifically add those AA GUIDs to your tenant in order to allow yourself to opt into this public preview that Microsoft has. And when you do that, your users then can start adding a passkey via Microsoft Authenticator app from either the My Security sign-in portal or directly from your Authenticator app. So in order to do that, you need to make sure you have a couple of things right. Of course, Passkeys is not supported on any platform. Your platform needs either to be Android or iOS, but specifically Android 14 or up or iOS 17 or up. Now, as this new feature is launched in Microsoft Authenticator app, always make sure that you have the newest Authenticator app version on your mobile phone installed. And I'm reading from my blog here. At the time of writing, that was version 6.8.7 or newer. But eventually, it will be. Make sure you always have the latest version on your mobile phone installed.
Right.
Now here comes the tricky part, because like I said, basically Microsoft Authenticator app becomes your provider for passkeys or passwords. Now, it can be that you already have another password provider on your phone installed, like you have a password keychain on your mobile device, like 1Password, for example, which is already taking that spot. Now, on Android, that's no issue. But on Apple devices, you can have only one password provider next to your iCloud keychain. So that means if you're already using 1Password, you have to change that to Microsoft Authenticator app, because that will be your new provider for passkeys. Now, I think for iOS, this will be a blocker for some people already using multiple password managers. But I also see a lot of noise around that, because I think in the end, Apple will change that or release that. I hope so, because that will really help the implementation of passkeys on iOS.
For sure. And I would hope they'll eventually get enough pressure from Microsoft and the other big players in the passkey space, because I'm putting myself back in the IT admin trenches. Some organizations, some enterprises may have hundreds or thousands of users with iOS devices that maybe the company is using a standardized password manager with their users on their mobile devices. And so now that, like you said, that's a big blocker if I want to use passkeys, and that slot is already taken up on iOS devices.
Exactly. Yeah.
Definitely a problem. So
yeah,
anyway,
it's
sorry.
a problem, but yeah, For anyone who's listening, make sure you drop an email to Tim Cook, and maybe he will release that limitation. So I
Right.
think the pressure also can come from the community itself.
Yep,
So
for sure.
I personally shared my feedback with Apple. They have a website where you can share your feedback, and I just get, okay, I can just try to raise some awareness. Maybe someone from the product team will read it, and but I think Microsoft is pushing hard on this because it's not that pretty. Android is no issue, but iOS,
Right.
it's Apple limitations.
And you've got a link to that right here in your blog post, I see. So I'll put that in the show notes too,
Cool.
as well, folks. So if you are using iOS yourself and you would like this change to be made, like myself and Jan would, go ahead and send the feedback, right?
So thanks in advance. So that being out of the way, so you have your phone prepped, you have the correct version of your operating system, you have the newest, brand new Microsoft Authenticator app installed. The last thing that you need to do on the device itself is to enable Bluetooth, because passkeys on mobile devices will work over Bluetooth, because you need to have that user presence, right? The device that you authenticate on and your mobile device needs to have some form of communication, which also makes it phishing resistant. But that's needed. And from my experience, if you have Bluetooth disabled and you want to use passkeys, it will automatically enable it for you. So they really did a good job on that part. So if you have it disabled, it will just pop up. It says, "Hey, Bluetooth is disabled," and 1 second later they enable it for you, and they just finish the authentication flow. So that's really cool. So yeah, and then on the Entra side, you need to add those specific AA GUID for Authenticator iOS and Android to your FIDO2 configuration, and then you're basically good to go. Then it's up to the user to register the passkey, because passkeys cannot be provisioned by admins. It's a user-centric enrollment. So the user needs to go in and register the passkey themselves. One last thing that's important around the registration for passkeys is that there is one requirement, which also was for FIDO2 security keys, that you need to have MFA set up already on your account in order to enroll a more strong credential like passkeys. Now, you don't have to enroll in Authenticator app first and after that enable passkeys, but what you can use is a temporary access pass that Microsoft provides, which is basically a temporary password that's only valid for a specific amount of time. It also will satisfy the MFA requirement. So you can the easiest way, I guess, is just signing into your Authenticator app using your username and a temporary access pass. And if everything sits right on your Entra tenant, it will just automatically create that passkey for you. So, and then basically you're up and running for passkey usage.
Nice. So, I mean, when we talk about deployments of new technologies and features, I mean, overall, this does not sound too terribly bad. And I myself compare it to rolling out MFA, because I've done that several times over the years, rolling out MFA to an organization, and I don't have to tell you, you know all the troubles and complaints and everything you get from end users about that. What do you think the overall experience is going to be, both for admins and for end users, doing rollout at large scale? So, I mean, obviously you're going to have to do the usual things like communicate the pending change to the user base, give them nice documented screenshots. Hey, you're going to see this, 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 and this. My sense is that it's going to be easier than the MFA rollout process was, but I haven't actually done a passkey rollout myself, so I can't say from experience. But I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I also haven't done a large rollout myself, because it's brand new, of course, and some organizations are a little hesitant to do public previews and they just wait for it to be generally available and then do the rollout. But I think it's quite simple. It's quite similar than the Authenticator app itself, the rollout for traditional MFA, because you already have the device, you have the Authenticator app installed, and for the user it's not that difficult because, like I said, if you use the temporary access pass, the experience is pretty good because you can enroll passkeys in different ways. You could go on your computer to your My Sign-ins portal, then go to security configuration, and then register a new credential after proving you have done MFA, because that's the tricky part. You
Right.
already need to have MFA in place. So for a user, that's a little complex. Instead, if you would say, hey, we're gonna do this passkey rollout, here's your temporary access pass, go into your app and register your new credential with this temporary access pass, that would be good for new enrollments.
Right.
So for onboarders, it's pretty similar to what they have done with Authenticator app. For existing configurations, so assume you already have enrolled MFA via Authenticator app, you have a head start because users already are used to using the Authenticator app.
Right.
It's already installed on their phone. It's already registered under that user. So from that, you can do an in-place upgrade to enroll your passkey, and that's I think that's in the works. It's there. It's working, but I haven't seen it myself. But you could technically bump up your traditional MFA and just add a new passkey next to that. So then you have two authentication methods in your authenticator,
Right.
which is a little confusing for the end user, because the end user can either do traditional MFA, but also can do passkey sign-in, which doesn't involve any username or password, because Passkeys is already a passwordless experience. So
Right.
I think for, like I said, for onboarding scenarios, it's pretty similar and it's not that big of a deal. Of course, you have the Bluetooth requirements, which can be a little tricky, but because that wasn't there. I think biometrics needs to be in place on your device. That was the same for Authenticator app, but I'm not sure if that will cause any problem. But overall, I think enrolling a passkey is not that difficult. Using a passkey, however, it's a little, how would I put this? There's still a lot of work to do to make it user-friendly, because I think in the backend, passkeys are there, but the front end is the most important part for the user. So we already saw that happening within Windows 11 and Windows 10, where they changed the user interface to where it says sign in with a security key. It now says sign in with your face, PIN code, or passkey, for example. And I think over time, that will improve and that will make it more user-friendly, because passkeys itself is user-friendly by themselves, but the interface, the UI, does also matter. So I think that will just need some time, because for example, the Windows team needs to put effort in that, and all other vendors in the market needs to adopt this new passkey behavior and just improve the user experience. So I think over time, when this will be more common, it will be no big issue. But yeah, like I said, it has a little more requirements than traditional MFA, but it's not that hard to do because we're already familiar with Authenticator app.
Right.
So
and that's half the battle right there, is just being familiar with the app, having users used to seeing it, and so they don't have to change a whole lot from that regard. One final thing I want to touch on before we wrap up here, and this is another talking point I've seen regarding passkeys as they've started to become, more used in the industry, and that is, you go through the process of enrolling passkeys and you're starting to use passkeys. You're only as secure as your least secure authentication method, right? So, in order to fully realize the security benefits of passkeys, at some point, you have to go back and remove the password and MFA credential, basically, so that it can no longer be used. Any thoughts or experiences on that portion of it yet? I mean, again, we're public preview with Passkeys and Entra right now, so still early days, but just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that as well before we wrap up.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because you're absolutely right. When I have multiple credentials and those are all tied to my account, an attacker could potentially use those. So they could still, I could have a passkey on my phone and still be tricked into clicking on a URL, provide my username, password, and do the good old MFA prompt. Because hey,
Yeah.
I knew how to do that. I've done that for years.
Right.
But then like you said, you can go ahead and say to the user, hey, you need to go and delete those old methods. But you could also have them as a sort of backup mechanism. And then on the Entra side, you can enforce authentication strengths for your resources.
Right.
So then you as an admin are in control. You can say, hey, for this resource, you can only use phishing-resistant MFA. So if you try to do good old MFA with either text or T2P to go to your email, it will say, no, you're authenticated, but then comes conditional access and says, no, you need to bump up your security. We need that passkey in order to read your email. So you
Yep.
can still have all those legacy MFA methods tied to your account, but you can't use them anymore for specific resources. So that's the beauty of conditional access, where you can be really specific on what a user can do on what resource and what authentication strengths they can use. And eventually, you can automate that cleanup. You say, okay, we are no longer using SMS verification for MFA. We can just go ahead, make a script for Graph API and just remove all the SMS from all the users, or just simply disable it, because that's also mentioned in my blog post. Before you're going to start with passkeys, it's pretty recommended to use the new authentication methods policy. So Microsoft has done pretty much work in order to get this landed properly, right? They have all these controls in place that you can use to tighten your security also on the back end. So make sure you use the new authentication policies, which you can then control what a user can register in the first place. And if you disable that, even if the user has registered MFA, like with the SMS, text-based, or voice call, it can no longer use that method, even if it's tied to the account. So I think authentication method policies is a way to start to control what users can register, and conditional access authentication strength is something that you can use in case you want to control what users can use to go into a specific resource like email or Teams or whatever.
Right. I have to say, I think conditional access might be my favorite feature in Entra. You can do so much cool stuff with conditional access. Maybe you and I need to do a conditional access episode at some point. Just saying,
Cool. Yeah, I'm up
So
to that.
sounds good. We'll have to have you back on. So, Jan, I think we've pretty much covered everything. Anything I missed?
No, I would say check out the blog post. It's really detailed. We haven't touched on the various experiences for the user, because one thing I want to stress is that how a device-bound passkey does not mean that you cannot use it on another device, right? So, for example, you could sign in on your MacBook using a passkey from your Authenticator app, which sits on an Android device. It's still a device-bound passkey, but you can use it cross-device. So the passkey itself is device-bound, but that does not mean that you cannot use it on other devices.
Right.
So it's really convenient for the end user. So check out the blog post which I have out there, which will visualize everything that we just talked about, and also show the user experience and the admin experience itself. So that will be a good starting point to get started with passkeys in Microsoft 365.
Sounds good. And just a reminder, folks, I'll be sure to link that in the show notes. So if you want to check that out, be sure to look there. Well,
Awesome.
Jan, I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge as always. It's good having you, my friend.
My pleasure. Until next time.
And yes, definitely. And those of you watching, thanks for spending some time with us. If you found value in today's episode, be sure to smash that like and subscribe button. I always have to do the YouTube thing at the end of every episode. That's if you're watching on YouTube, of course. We are available on all the other various podcasting platforms out there. So chances are, depending on where you consume your podcast, your content, you can find us. With that, I'll let you get back to your day. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week for another episode of the Security Swarm podcast. Stay safe out there.